Today we are joined by the best Zoroark player in the world as we talk about the team he used to get top 32 at the LAIC and Perth Regional Championships this past weekend. Jim Sulivan, ladies and gentlemen. Say hello.
I'm really excited to be here, really excited to be on the channel and talk about Hisuian Zoroark. I think he is a phenomenal mon and he is underutilized, and specifically as more of a supportive mon. And I really wanted to talk about the team and sort of share for anyone who's looking to build with this mon. He's a lot of fun, and he's got a few different modes, even though his stats sort of hold him back sometimes. He actually can be used a few different ways, other than chucking a hyper beam and a choice specs on it and just hoping you KO everything inside.
To my understanding as well, you've been using this for quite a while, right? This isn't like a new mon for you, right? I'm pretty sure even at the locals last year, I saw you running it.
Yeah, so I originally, like a few people, when we started being able to use Hisuian mons, I tested it out as like, I'm hiding my hyper beam, and it was just really frail and really glass, and basically a good player would just find it by throwing out a heat wave or like an icy wind, just trying to get speed dominance and then just find it without really punishing its opening play. And then after that, you just have a mon on the field that's barely a glass cannon, doesn't have an ability. His item almost is mandatory choice, focus sash or choice specs, and then it can just be exploded really easily. And I was burning on Showdown, just trying to climb, and I ran into a European team, and I found it fascinating. And then, as you do, we started chatting. And so I don't know if you have it up, but basically,
wrong one. Hold on. Oh, I've got it in the there. It is. There it is. Had them in the wrong order.
yeah. And basically, like, this is the run that took me to Worlds. And for those of you who can see, Hisuian Zoroark became very much my favorite piece to use. But the original team that this guy used, I think he got top 32 in one of the European tournaments, was basically, I sort of twisted it, but the core he had was the Ursaluna, the Crystalia, and the Enamorus, with Ogerpon and then Zoroark as supportive mons. And I can't remember what he had in the final.
Was it the D-Knight version, or was that your own tech?
That was my own take, because I found the team really struggled into Torkoal, Litigant, and Psyspam.
Okay.
So I just chucked the D-Knight on there with Assault Vest, and he kind of invalidates that as long as they don't hit the sleep powders. But yeah, basically that was his core, and I loved it. And the whole idea with that team was use Zoroark to taunt their supportive mon that's going to try and taunt Crystalia, and then you get into Trick Room, and then you're in Trick Room, you pull out Zoroark, throw in Ursaluna. There's a lot of synergies between the two in terms of their typing, even though they're both normal. Zoroark's not really a normal type because he's immune to the only thing that's exactly. So it's great. And then after that, you're off to the races. And then in the late game, you have this super speedy mon who can just chip the last few things, even if it's, it can win if Fluttermane's being chipped. Like if it's at 75%, then you're always going to survive and get a KO. So it's sort of, if you leave it there and it comes out late game, it can be really annoying. But his build, and if we flip back to the team I'm currently using, his build was, that one, yeah, perfect.
The LAIC team.
His build was a bit different. He had, I think, I don't know. I know he had Taunt, and what he had instead was U-Turn, and then I think Shadow Ball and Will-O-Wisp. It might have been Bitter Malice, but basically, I was like, I really like that idea, but I don't want to run it on hard Trick Room. I want to add a speed mode. So then I threw on Icy Wind, and after that began the love story with me and Hisuian Zoroark, because I just really enjoyed having the Icy Wind plus the Taunt meant I could lead, and back then I had Ogerpon, I could lead this weird speed mode where Ogerpon could suddenly be faster than a Fluttermane if it didn't have booster after an Icy Wind, and then just KO it. And then Zoroark was sitting there on 1 health, having taken like a Dazzling Gleam or a Moonblast, or like a Heat Wave, and then Ogerpon and him are just going off, as they're now the fastest things in the field, because it hits a really nice speed tier as it gets over everything that's 172. It's 178. It can speed tie with Ogerpon, which can be annoying, but other than that, like it's quite a nice spot. And then, yeah, I just really loved that mode. So when we came into this regulation, I was like, all right, this thing is going to go crazy because the stuff that I had to deal with before using Hisuian Zoroark that I needed the Enamorous for, which is all the treasures are ruined, they're gone. And your dark types are so much more limited. Like Incineroar is still annoying, but you can deal with Incineroar. And without like a copious amount of dark, like also Urshifu Surging Strikes gives this thing so much grief, and that's why I always had to chuck on Water Ogerpon, because you have to really punish the choice. But in this format, Zoroark is absolutely fabulous. And I might talk about this specific set. So yeah, it's 252, 252. But the special defense is specific, and that is because Porygon.
P2, baby.
P2 with download, a lot of my mons are actually really defensive, so I pretty much always give P2 special defense, special attack. But there are rare instances where Zoroark would come out in this set with Arcanine, and so Arcanine is balanced, and just Arcanine doesn't really need to have that extra 4 on the special. So Zoroark, it doesn't really matter. I could put it in health, but at the end of the day, may as well put it in special defense, and it just triggers that P2 will always get that attack, which is kind of useless into Zoroark. Like he's still always almost going to get it down to Sash, not with Ice Beam. And yeah, that's also why Zoroark's great. The Tera Fighting variant of P2 is really dangerous because once you're Tera Fighting, you're stuck using Ice Beams, and it's not really what you want to be clicking if you don't know what the mon is.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's really nice there. But basically, yeah, why I love this mon is if you're versing a Trick Room team and they have P2, you disable the P2. And if you're versing things like Indeedee and like Armarouge and Psyspam, part of what this team does is you just go, okay, I'm going to taunt your Indeedee. So next turn, yeah, you might be in Trick Room, but you just have to use Psychic, which is never really what you want to be doing with Indeedee. And with Porygon, you just kind of have to sit there and attack. And if you're sitting there and attacking with Porygon, it's fine. But as long as you position other mons around Zoroark that are getting off bigger bits of damage, P2 will eventually lose those damage trades.
Yeah, and look, if it can't recover as well, obviously P2 becomes a lot easier to deal with. I think that's one of the things with it, right? Is normally you probably pick it up with that third attack.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
when,
that's
when
right.
it can't recover after 2, it obviously makes it a lot easier to deal with.
Yeah, and you're in this weird, not stalemate, but like P2 and Zoroark sort of look at each other and go, do you really want to waste your Ice Beam on me? And Zoroark looks at it and goes, well, I can't do anything to you. But that's also why I really enjoy Bitter Malice. Like, it's 100% accurate, and you get that defense drop. And
the attack drop.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the attack drop, yes. And why... It's a very tricky mon to use, but in this variant, what you're looking to do, and with this team structure and how I play it, is Zoroark is sort of this initial boost of damage or positioning. You use it to get the Icy Wind off. You use it to taunt something. You use it to Will-O-Wisp, and the Will-O-Wisp is the most deadly. If they lead Rillaboom, and you Will-O-Wisp that mon, they're down a mon for most of the game. And like he can sit there and he can kill the Zoroark, but after that, once the Zoroark's down, like Rillaboom just has such a hard time even dealing with Ursaluna. And then the rest of the mons on the team, like Archaludon, Palapa, once Rillaboom's burned, he's really not hurting Palapa. Like Palapa will take him out over time, and Rillaboom really stops making beneficial trades. And that's why I really like this mon. Like if the team is basically built around Zoroark, that first turn, you punish them trying to guess. And what you'll see in this team is I've got Archaludon there, I've got Sinistcha, I've got Palapa, and I've got Ursaluna. Ursaluna is there because everyone always is a little bit cautious about throwing a move first turn into Ursaluna because the Protect is so obvious. Once he gets going, he's far more a threat than he is first turn, with only having access to the Headlong Rush, whereas the Facade is just not really doing much damage. And the same can be said for Archaludon. You really don't want to throw attacks out that you would normally use to catch Zoroark. Like even a Snarl, it will do, like it does too much to Zoroark. But if you throw a Snarl into Archaludon, you've just given it the defense buff. And it's still a decent position, but if you waste too much time trying to catch Zoroark in that first turn, you can find yourself out of position. And if Zoroark's not there, it was just a wasted turn. And that's really how this team is built around him. And you can sort of see that in all the mons. Like, for example, if I lead Sinister, go for hard Trick Room, and then they've taunted, odds are, for example, on Electabuzz, I taunt you faster. So you get nothing off that turn. If you go for the Electro Web, well, it's not Zoroark, it's Archaludon. If it's Sinister, the Electro Web literally does nothing. And so there are lots of things in the meta, and why I felt he was a really good call. There's a lot of things in the meta that he kind of just pops off against because he can force them to make what I would say low reward plays to try and catch him out. And one thing I would talk about, my favorite end game with this team is against Rain, and that is Basculegion. Basculegion hates Zoroark because it has to make a call. Am I flip turning as into an Archaludon to do nothing and give it a defense bump, or am I flip turning into Zoroark? And if I flip turn into Zoroark, I get massive damage off. But if I call it wrong, the defense is up and their Archaludon just got this free buff. And then in the late game, if Zoroark's left on 1 health and they want to close out with last respects, great. Well, I'm immune, so I just win that 1v1. And then Zoroark against Pelipper, if it's Basculegion and Pelipper, Zoroark has enough special attack where if the Pelipper's being chipped, great, pop that, now I'll deal with your Basculegion. And his typing is just so good at, in the end game, being like, oh, right, I'm immune to your last big damage dealer. So you're going to have to lock into something a bit different. So it's like Aquajet and things like that. And the rest of the team just goes, yeah, that's not enough damage to take me out, bro. So that's how I use Zoroark. And I sort of will talk a bit more about the other mons. So Sinister, Bronzong was on a different team with Zoroark for a long time. Basically, this whole team, if you look at the abilities other than Pelipper, and that's just because Rain is broken, none of the abilities reveal themselves, and Sinister's so good. His Hospitality not ever being able to trigger first turn just means, yep, I can hide a Zoroark. And you pretty much always have the Zoroark revealed after the first turn. So you really are looking with this team to make sure, and I'm always looking forward to make sure that once you reveal Zoroark, I've gotten, the turn I just had was beneficial to me and not you. I am ahead in the game, and you have to come slightly back. Might not be my much, but if it's just by Will-O-Wisp or a little bit of speed drop, once Zoroark gets out of there, he's built a better position for the team. And then Sinister is revealed, and sort of the illusion is gone. I don't need to worry about it anymore. And that's why Pelipper ends up fitting here, because he works so well with Archaludon, and he is the only mon that can't lead a Zoroark, except in the late game, which is strange. But if Pelipper has been led, there are situations where I can put Zoroark in the back in the 3rd slot. And if I move around my positioning a bit, ironically, Zoroark can come out. Rain is already on, so therefore Drizzle doesn't trigger, and Pelipper's right there. So yeah,
that's cool. One question I have as well right now, I'm sure there's probably an obvious reason for this, but no Shadow Ball on Sinister or Zoroark. Was there ever a thought there to, I guess, potentially play that mind game where, you know, maybe your Zoroark hides a Sinister, you don't get attack turn 1, and because of that, you don't reveal yourself? Or was it you just felt that Shadow Ball on both mons was just not really worth it?
No, it was definitely, I actually, when I was originally building with him, I was a bit fixated. Like, you're always fixated, like, oh, I can hide him in that first turn. But I basically found that it's actually really hard to hide Zoroark against good players. You can do it, but the effort that it takes, for example, if Sinister had Shadow Ball and Zoroark had Shadow Ball, Zoroark can use Shadow Ball next to, say, Ursaluna and not reveal its Sinister, because Sinister is always going to be faster than Ursaluna. The problem is that Zoroark's so fast, he's probably going to be faster than, like, their Dragonite, their Ninetales, their Archaludon.
Very true, yeah.
And that reveals that, oh, that's not a Sinister, because there's no way you're running that much speed on Sinister. And so I struggled with that in the beginning, but then I eventually learned, like, the hidden tie is so rare, because by the time you continue, you know, if you're trying to continue the illusion, you know, it's such an odd turn where they haven't hit a mon with anything. specifically in this team, because you normally, other than Ursaluna, you kind of do want to, and Archaludon, but Archaludon has such a specific set of moves. The actual one that I did consider was Archaludon has Snarl, and Zoroark can learn it. And for a hot second, I thought, oh, maybe Dark Zoroark, but he's just not good enough because he loses the speed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I never found, basically in all my games, I never found that preventing him from being seen in turn one was an easy play or a largely effective play. It sort of didn't really progress the board state, and they also in your ideal Zoroark situation, especially in both in tournament and in GC, they made the mistake first turn. So they made a big play, i.e. Tera their Paragon, which I don't think I've never seen anyone do, because they can't, but because Ursaluna is going to protect, but Tera their Paragon, go with a Terrify eyeing into, say, Arcanine or Ursaluna. You sort of never see it because it's such a big value.
It's a big risk on that first turn, I think.
Yeah, and I'll say in game 2s and 3s, especially if I'm ahead, players get bolder and they start to try and call where the Zoroark is, and that's where the team wants to be, basically. If you can force them to go, is this illusion? I'm going to have to bait it out. You've kind of put yourself in this position where it's like you're playing them now. Like, you're a little bit ahead because you're forcing them to play the game that they don't want to play. And that's really what the team is trying to do with this set of 6.
Yeah, the mind games, I think, are definitely one of the scariest things about it, right? It's just that not knowing, it's so scary, especially when, as you said, the team is well built around it in the sense where you can, you have certain ways to punish, if they, make the wrong call, right? Or, they go for the safe plays with Snarl and whatnot. So yeah, that is really cool, but it's definitely the mind games this one has. Like, Illusion is just, it's a very interesting ability, and when you know what I think you're doing with the team, it makes it a lot stronger.
And that's the thing. Illusion is an ability that you need to build your whole team around. Otherwise, you took him on without an ability. And that's where it is. Like, every time I'm looking at team building with him, I go, okay, if I'm not getting a reward from Illusion, and that's why Palapa was, I really went back and forth with a Prankster Mon with Rain Dance, but frankly, Palapa is just such a nice Mon in this team because you want the water resist. You want like the steel resist from Goldango in addition, so you can lead, Make It Rain is such a good way to catch Zoroark out.
Yeah.
And how I punish that is the final piece of the puzzle, which is Zoroark's Tera. And if you go to Zoroark, Stella is actually amazing with him. When Stella first came out, I was like, I'm either way with this. But then I was like, oh, right, Zoroark's best thing is his typing. You never want to lose it. And you also are very rarely clicking Bitter Malice more than once or Icy Wind more than once. And sometimes, and my favorite thing to do is when you verse a player who is all in on, say, Goldango, force them to Tera. Because if they don't Tera, Bitter Malice...
It's going to one-shot them, isn't it?
It's a roll, depending on how bulky they are, but if they've built a lot less bulk and a lot more speed, it's a one-shot.
Is it always a one-shot with Stella, or is it a roll with Stella?
It's a one-shot with Stella if they're not bulky.
Yeah, okay.
If they are bulky, it's not, but one of the... So it's less common now, but Goldango Dragon used to be around.
Mm-hmm.
And that was always fabulous. When they would Tera Dragon, and I would Tera Stella Bitter Malice, they would avoid the KO, but then I go, great.
I'll just Icy Wind.
Yeah, like Icy Wind has the Stella bonus. Like, let's go. And then the other thing, and I talked about Rillaboom, but yeah, Will-O-Wisp also, there's so many physical mons. And also Archaludon. Archaludon, there's a lot of Archaludon, Annihilate, a lot of setup. Oh, and Dragonite. Dragonite and Zoroark. Yeah, odd relationship where Dragonite goes, I can scale you in one with Scale Shot. But then if that Dragonite that's very supportive is burned, it really starts to struggle to get out damage. And yes, Zoroark's going down to the second Scale Shot after the burn, but then for the rest of the game, often I have game plans with this team where I'm like, great, the Dragonite's burned. It can stay there. It can't hurt Archaludon. It can't hurt Ursaluna. It can haze if it really wants to, but it's really not going to be making the damage trades. And yeah, Zoroark's dead, but I didn't need him in the team. Like Sinister, Ursaluna, Archaludon
Yeah,
are just sticking around.
that feels like such a good trade as well. Like getting a burn onto a D-Knight can be crippling for that mon because I mean I'm sure you've seen it, right? But there's a lot of mons where it's like, you know, that fourth hit on it is like a roll to one shot, fifth sometimes is a roll as well. So if you can burn it and like potentially turn what could be a one shot into a potential three shot, obviously I think that's massive. Especially when you factor in scale shots, you know, chances to miss and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. And then also like it's so hard for that Dragonite to throw Scale Shot into Zoroark because it's often Archaludon. And so do you really want to set up my Archaludon? Yeah, you can get rid of it A's, but if you get it wrong, where's your game progression? Like you've just given me 4 defense up, and if I am Archaludon, I've thrown the body press into whatever is into the left slot. So it becomes really problematic. Which I guess I should talk about the rest of the team. I don't think there's too many hidden things in the rest of it. So Ursaluna is there to do Ursaluna things. Tera Fairy
is.
Sorry,
this one's Tera Dragon.
That's Tera Dragon. For the LAIC, it was Tera Fairy. I should have.
So this one should be Tera Fairy. Nah, all good.
Yeah.
Tera Fairy obviously fantastic into the fighting types. I'm assuming that's the main thing.
It's actually King Gambit.
Oh, King Gambit, of course. Yeah, sorry.
So yeah, Electabuzz, actually, when the balance stuff, and I feel like it died off a little bit, but the balance stuff that I was expecting to see in LAIC, I was expecting to see Zoroark never wants to verse a Darkmon. Like even against someone like, and King Gambit particularly, a good lead into Zoroark is Electabuzz King Gambit. And they can do one of two things. They can follow me to get rid of the Will-O-Wisp, or they can just go, I'm going to Sword Dance. If you want a Will-O-Wisp, that's fine. I'll just Sword Dance again next turn. You're not really progressing the game, and I'll just Electro Web and catch the Zoroark out, which was a play that became annoying because, yeah, Zoroark kind of sits there and goes, oh, I don't really know what to do. I can't use Icy Wind. I can't use Bitter Malice, and Taunt's not really going to help. So Ursaluna, Tera Fairy is able to just, I'm going to Tera. I'm against Electabuzz. He can't really hurt me because I'm an Ursaluna. And King Gambit, even with a Sword Dance, gets really punished. And then this takes us back to what I said, like Rillaboom. He doesn't want to be around until Zoroark is revealed because he has to Tera. And if you can force Rillaboom to Tera Fire to avoid Will-O-Wisp, well, Ursaluna can now eat it.
Eat this food.
Yeah, so it allowed me to be, it allowed to throw that balance team off a little bit. And then now moving on. And then so I did try Sword Dance. I really like Sword Dance on Ursaluna, but this meta for Ursaluna, Headlong Rush is just too good. It just does too much damage.
It's insane.
Yeah, and then Earthquake. I played around with like taking Earthquake off, but you always want that spread. Sinister just doesn't mind being hit by an Earthquake at all. And yeah, you can just get in these end games where Earthquake picks up both mons and then you just call it a day.
Yeah, I think the ability to just run through teams with Earthquake is definitely, I mean, it's insane, right? If you position it well, you get Ursaluna on the board, whether it be, you know, Tailwind or Trick Room, and it's the fastest thing in the game. It just does stupid amounts of damage. It'll just, you know, it'll run through teams.
Yeah, and the spreads on Ursaluna, that 57, I was so happy. So this is a shiny Ursaluna Alpha that I found in Pokemon Legendary Arceus, and I was so happy. I caught 2 in the same horde after trying to find one for ages, and when I loaded up into the game and saw that it was that speed stat, I was like, I love you. This is my Ursaluna.
Is 5 anything in particular, or is it just because it's like close to minimum speed?
No, it is very particular. So it is, Incineroar can't get slower than you, but you also are faster. So against hard Trick Room teams, I always normally assume they're Ursaluna, both normal Ursaluna and Ursaluna Blood Moon. If it's hard Trick Room, sometimes we'll be running min speed. And even if I don't work it out in the first game, if we're in a tournament, I can normally work it out in the next. And basically the 8 extra points? The 57, the 8 extra points of speed from his min lets you sort of catch them out. It also puts him in a nicer speed tier for Icy Wind, but he is still incredibly slow. He's a slow bear. And I will say, if there was things I would change about the team, I think in Perth, I probably should have looked at the speed. I think I could have sped him up because people had really walked away from
Turbo
running.
Bear.
Yeah, people had really walked away from running min speed in Sin. But it also is really nice in the GCs that you always go, okay, I know I'm slower than Insin.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they outspeed you in Trick Room, you go, okay, you've got something silly like Iron Ball, so this is fine. Because you don't really have an item, so no, you don't have a berry or something like that. But yeah, that's where the speed is for. It's just to make sure that in Trick Room, because this really is a Trick Room team. It's not hard Trick Room, but it does want to put itself in Trick Room often.
In an ideal world, yeah.
Yeah, and then so it's very regular that I would always have the slowest bear on the field, which is really helpful in the current meta. And then the rest in special defense, because when you have a bulky Ursaluna that takes like a Make It Rain or something like that, it can catch people out. And I don't need to put in speed, and therefore, yeah, the bulk is just fabulous.
And I get that. Very cool. What about Hisuian Archaludon? I know this is the one piece that changed between events. I guess you want to talk about why you had it and then why you eventually dropped it.
Yeah. I'll talk about like I'll say Archaludon and Pelipper are pretty. I might jump to them and then finish.
Yeah. No, we can do that. That's fun.
Because Archaludon. So Archaludon is just amazing. Like
One of the best ones.
Yeah, even in that earlier regulation last year, I experimented with Archaludon because I was like, this thing's amazing as hiding as Zoroark. Like, Electro Shot doesn't reveal itself until you've used it. Like, Body Press is amazing for, hyper voices and things. Like, yep, you're just helping me out. Like, you're just giving me those defense buffs. And then provide such a great late game win condition. But then also in addition to that, if you put Archaludon next to Zoroark and then you lead, say, a Sinistra, if you burn their fighting type, attacker, great. Like, I don't care anymore. Like, Sneasler does outspeed Zoroark, but you can get, there are obviously, I think, Sneasler Adamant won't hit Zoroark's speed tier. So there are a lot of people.
62, right? Or something like that, 162? Or am I thinking mouse?
No, I think it might be 70. What? It's isn't it like 72?
Yeah, 172.
Yeah.
I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah, and so once I enter game 2 and I know Zoroark is faster, it's a problem. This mon actually doesn't mind Sneasler. Diaclaw obviously is annoying for Diaclaw reasons, but Close Combat doesn't affect you, and if they're running coaching or something like that, then they're stuck using Diaclaw. And ironically, I think it's a roll on non-adamant Sneaslers to pick you up in 2. Oh, wow. And that can be really, because it's not very effective, it can be really frightening, because if you've used Will-O-Wisp, it means you're living again. And then you can actually go on the offense, because Sneasler has next to he doesn't have the biggest defensive stats. Like, a Bitter Malice into that slot is really annoying. And I've often put it in end games where I go, okay, you're burned now. Here's a Bitter Malice. Do you want to stand in front of Archaludon and just throw close combats? Because you're really helping me out. And it's annoying because they go, I just want to kill your, I want to feint this Zoroark. And I go, yeah, that's fine. Good luck to you. And that's really good when I use this in LAIC, he's the biggest mon in the format. And, Diaclaw, obviously, if you sleep or paralyze, it's really punishing. But the poison, you don't really mind. Like, you're going down anyway.
Exactly, yeah.
So, and then back to Archaludon. Snarl. So this Archaludon is really, I think the weirdest thing, and I know some people have talked about it, is the Psychic Tera. But this team struggles a little bit into size spam.
Yeah.
But with the Psychic Tera, Archaludon, it's really nice. Sneasler gets throat chop, but it's a weird one, but they very rarely throw throat chop into Archaludon turn 1 if they lead in DD Sneasler, because it's not really doing great damage. If it terrors, yes, it will do a lot, but it doesn't have stab, so it's not going to do that much. And then I get the defense buff. I can't snarl, but it's a big read, basically.
Yeah, I get that. It's also good into like the sunroom stuff as well with Gallade, which I think is pretty nice.
Yeah, that's right. It can sit in front of Gallade. It can sit in front of Hatterini. Yeah, Hatterini and Indeedee. Like, just Terroring Psychic and Snarling, unless Hatterini has Covert Cloak, you can really outlast the Trick Room.
Yeah.
And then that feeds into why the rain mode is here, because Palapa and Archaludon go, okay, if you're running like Torkoal, Psy Spam, it's really hard.
Eventually,
you
Torkoal has to come in, and the second you want to click a button, Pelly just says, like, I'm
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, Pally just says, I'm here. And then my favorite play, and we haven't really talked about this, but the rotation with Sinister and Pally with Arch next to it against those Trick Room teams, when you're snarling, it becomes unwinnable. You snarl the Torkoal, they switch it out. You snarl the Indeedee, Indeedee gets chunked. You then go for you then snarl again. The Torkoal comes in, he's snarled. The Gallade is trying to put you down with Sacred Sword, but you're switching in Sinistra, and then they switch in their Torkoal because they want to try and get rid of Sinistra. And then the Trick Room turns are over, Palapa comes in, Electro Shots picking up anything that's left. Like, that's a classic game plan against Psy Spam with this team. And it works just effortlessly well because it's able to, and that's what I would say, one of the secondary cores of this team is the Archaludon Sinistra Palapa is just so good at always ensuring you have rain on, always ensuring Archaludon is there for the long haul. And Sinistra is just like this nice little typing, which, you throw electric attack into Palpa, Sinistra says, yeah, look, that wasn't great, but I'll be fine. I've still got 3 more switch-ins for you, so that's all you need.
Yeah, the defensive synergy between the three as well is just super nice. Like, they cover each other very well.
Yeah, exactly. And so what I will say, so that's Archaludon. That's why Tera Psychic's there. This team originally had a really hard matchup into Psy Spam. I played around with like Tera Bug, Tera Grass, and I was just like, you know what? I just need to resist fighting. And this patches this matchup so well, and it really did. And then finally the Palapa, I built bulky. I put a citrus berry on it. You'll see the special defense. It's very slow. And I think that 8 should be in the special defense. It's very slow, but basically it's very slow, but it's very bulky. And it's, given that all the Palapas are largely built to be quite frail, I had a lot more at LAIC. It was quite the opposite of Perth. And Perth people were really pushing the offense, so it started to survive less. But in LAIC, it would just take really big attacks and just be around long enough to switch in Sinistra and get Archaludon back to where he needed to be. And when you're playing a Sinistra team, you want it to be realistically getting off hospitality 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, because big heals.
That's big heals for nothing. And so that finally is another, and I'm sort of going through sort of how I play this team partly as I talk about the Mons, but it's just so interconnected. Sinister and Zoroark have this amazing synergy that your Zoroark gets hit, it's on 1 health. Archaludon takes a bit of chip, it might be only at 80%. You switch out Sinister, you heal up Archaludon, then you switch in Zoroark, you want it to get KO'd. You want them to KO your Zoroark, and then you want them to do a little bit more chip on Archaludon, and then you switch in Sinister. And that's one of the plays that I really used a lot in LAIC, because people would think about Archaludon and Sinistra and go, yep, he switched in. Okay, that Archaludon is at 80%, 90%. Great, I can kill it in 2 moves. But then I go, okay, here's Zoroark. Thanks for KOing it. Now it's back. That turn where you were expecting to get one of those chip turns off, that's not worked now. Archaludon's gotten the 25% back up. And now Rage Powder's on the field. You don't have that game plan. And I've disrupted it successfully. And that started to really, I think that's what took this team to the next level, is I really started to recognize the frailty of Zoroark was actually something I could use
to make type thing.
Yeah, and that made it really good. Once I find that with Glass Mons, if you can put them in a position that you go, you've done your job, and you've really helped us accelerate our position in this game, you can get so much momentum because you can turn a KO that they thought would be critical into a negative. And that's really where that final bit of synergy is between the sort of the four.
Yeah,
because the core. Yeah.
So I was gonna say it's obviously a bit of a different situation, right? But obviously me being a Chi-Yu player, it is a pretty frail mod, especially when you play it with specs. And a lot of the time people will aim it down, but you know, a lot of the time it's able to get off enough chip where something like an Urshifu can come in and kind of just like clean up the game from there. You know, they commit so much to killing this one piece. Maybe you take one KO, chip two more, and then all of a sudden you can kind of just clean up the end game with the rest of your team.
Yeah, exactly. And so once I really, it took a while to work that out with Zoroark, but then when I started making that play quite regularly, I was like, this is really good because you're almost using Zoroark as a KO blocker. Like you're bringing him to go down to block next turn's KOs, not this turn. And it really helped progress the team.
Yeah, no, that's really cool.
And then finally, so then now onto, I was deadly scared of Marco Sun. I saw it in the finals of the tournament before the regional before LAIC, and I booked my flights, and I was like, oh my god, this Sun is so good. Like, yes, he lost, but I was like looking at this team and like the way he used Ursaluna, the way it functioned, I was just like, this team is so good. I'm really scared of it. And even though I had a rain team, like I kept racking my brain with like 5 mons because Ursaluna, Archaludon, Zoroark, Sinistcha, and Palapa, they were just so good together. Ursaluna offered that extra mode of immediate offense, and then the others really, and then Archaludon, that really long game slow play. And then the rest of the 3 to really support. So I was like, I need to have something. Like, I thought Marco Sun would just be everywhere. I thought I was going to run into Marco Sun and I was just going to have to play the aims of my life. And it just felt really hard when I was testing. And so I was actually in a building group session and I was like, I'm going to LAIC and I don't think I can beat Marco Sun. And we played around with all these different mons. My favorite was Alolan Persian because it has Rain Dance and Taunt and is faster than Jump Pluff. And I knew we were cooking, but it was terrible in every other matchup. And then we originally settled on Arcanine with Intimidate. And I was like, yeah, it's good, but basically the issue was when they lead the Ursaluna Porygon mode, you're forced to Tera the Arcanine. And then in the late game, Charizard's like, hey, bud, remember me? And just KOs it. Because it's Tera. It was Tera Grass originally. And I was like, yeah, this is really annoying. And then I was like, you know what? I'm playing Zoroark. Intimidate's good, but if I'm playing Zoroark, and I always see it as, you know, how many mons can you hide as? And when I had it Intimidate on, I was like, well, you know, it's not Zoroark. So it's just another, it was sort of countering the team. Like, it made them easier when I was testing on Showdown. It made them easier to play because they were like, great, I know that's Pelipper. I know that's Arcanine. I can now build my position from there. And then I threw the Flash Fire on it and I was like, this is really odd. But into Marco Sun, and I actually really would have liked to face him using, or any of the Sun, I really would have liked to have faced him with this Arcanine.
Sorry to cut you off here. So this was Flash Fire, not Intimidate?
This was Flash Fire.
Okay,
sorry.
Okay. Let me change that. Sorry. Because I remember seeing it was Flash Fire, obviously during LAIC.
This might have been an old paste. Yeah, no. So I changed it to Flash Fire and I made it Tera Bug, and that basically, and then because originally it was Tera Grass, but I really wanted it to be usable against other things,
like
and I'll be honest,
and whatnot.
It didn't really work. At LAIC, it never fit as well against other teams. I didn't really bring it basically, and I'll talk about my run, but basically the Bug Tera with the Lumberry largely invalidates Sun, and I'll talk about why. Not that I ever got a chance to verse Marco with it, but basically if they led P2 and Luna, the Arcanine and the Zoroark guaranteed that the P2 got attack.
Yeah.
Then I could taunt it, and then I could start just trying to chip away at the pieces. By tearing Bug, it meant they couldn't Tera fighting and just pop it. And then after that, with the Flash Fire, whatever mode they had in the back, Torkoal invalidated. It doesn't have an attack on me. Charizard,
yep, air slash, but
you have to air slash, and then Zoroark's really threatening because if I get off an Icy Wind, Arcanine's just popping you in one. So I almost always knew that when I had Arcanine there, Charizard's really hard to bring. So I was almost guaranteed. I always felt that I was guaranteed to face different parts of the team and never the Charizard mode. Because also, if he's left without tearing in the end game, what can Charizard do? Like air slash a Hisuian Arcanine? It just doesn't work.
That mon loses so much value when it clicks air slash. So much
value.
Yeah,
exactly. And then that's why Flash Fire was there, because Torkoal can't overheat into you, so you can't guess Zoroark and then be like, great, I'm gonna overheat out. And if that's when I had Intimidate, it's like, yeah, that's Arcanine, that's fine, I'm switching out, I don't care. Whereas Flash Fire, it's like, you just gave me a buff, you didn't use the move. And this thing with Sun on, and I never actually got to do this, but also the Will-O-Wisp procs Flash Fire. So there was an idea that part of the idea was that, oh, okay, if Sun is on and I proc the Flash Fire,
you can self-proc Blitz. Yeah, okay.
You self-proc Blitz, but Flash Fire is like as strong as Solar Power. So you actually have Solar Power, but you now have the superior Fire move. And then if Sun is on, like if they bring that Sun mode, it's so hard. Like Jumpluff has to double you with Sleep Powder, which it really doesn't want to do because it has to Tera. And back then, I think originally in the tournament before, he was Ghost. So I was like, I like that matchup because if you lead Sun and you Tera Ghost, Flare Blitz might pick you up. And you're really not really doing much. You're not really progressing the game. So that was why Arcanine was there. And he did his job. I did verse one Sun team at LAIC, and it was against, and I'll talk about this in the run, it was against a good player, but it's so hard. It's so hard with the Flash Fire there. You just don't want to click your fire attacks, because if you have Sun on, then I have the strongest Fire Mon, and it's an Arcanine, right? Like it's got this bulk. It's got good defense, good special defense. Like it just sits there.
Yeah, it can sit around for quite a while and do quite a bit of damage.
Yeah, and that's why I ran so much attack on it too, because I always thought, like, if I'm taking this thing, I just want you chunking things and going down, and then the rest of the mons, and then maybe I have my rain mode in the back, and just we clean it up from there.
One thing as well, I guess, to throw out there is Flash Fire also, what's it called? Like, you can hide Zoroark, right, which is nice. I think you mentioned that before. But also, against the Torkoals as well, you don't intimidate them out turn one. I think that was one of the biggest issues Incineroars had was, they want to lead the Torkoal so they get the free switch out turn one into, whatever mon it is they have in the back to deal damage. Especially if it's something like Ursaluna, right? Because it enables you to go into the Ursaluna and not have to worry about the Intimidate on that first turn.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like, hiding a Zoroark against Marco's Sun is, and being able to do it is such a big benefit. Exactly how you outlined it. Like, that's why Intimidate left, because that team kind of wants it.
Yeah, exactly. They like, that free switch out saying, hey, I've got Charizard next to Jumpluff in Sun, or, Ursaluna in Sun.
And that Ursaluna was really punishing. So, and then also part of this was one of the Marco Sun leads, the game plan was Zoroark, Hisuian Arcanine. If not Marco, but if whoever's running the team, leads P2, I taunt it, and Arcanine just starts getting off damage. It just starts putting stuff down, and then that team, I think, once Porygon is taunted, you can start to, when I did practice against it, you can start to just get ahead of it. Because the other pieces in that team kind of don't want to deal with Arcanine except for the Luna. And yeah, Zoroark with Icy Wind can put the Luna. It doesn't do that much, but if a lot of them are not running that much special bulk, it does do a fair bit of chip. Like, it's still an Icy Wind. of a max second stat Zoroark. Like
Yeah,
it's not
still
enough.
super effective damage.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the Arcanine, and I might if we talk about the LIC run, I can sort of talk about some of the games.
Do you want to do the run first, or want to do the rest of the other variants of the team first?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about the variants and explain. Yeah, I'm happy to like. It's really there are really subtle changes that I made that unfortunately I think was still the right call. Oh, and we should talk about the Sinistra had strength sap going into LAIC.
Swap that out for life too, I can see.
Yeah, I swapped that out for Life Dew and I changed the Tera. The Tera Fairy was before LAIC, I still think King Gambit was quite prominent. And I really liked having 2 Tera Fairies on the team when I had a Psychic Archaludon, and it meant I could set up positions not only with Ursaluna Tera Fairing, but if Sinistra Tera Fairied, he can Rage Powder if they don't have safety goggles, and then you sort of end up doing these bad trades, and then eventually you just get in a position where you win. And yeah, Tera Fairy was really nice, but it changed. So yeah, jumping on to the changes in the team for the GC and Perth, Terra Water was superior. Basically, Sinistra doesn't Terra in front of Archaludon, and against Pelipper, he normally switches out if he's there into Archaludon. So I didn't need to worry about Terraing Water and then getting one shot by Electro Shot. And then I was really, when I versed King Gambits, I was actually always bringing my Ursaluna. Even if they brought like Rillaboom, then it was great because I was like, great, Zoroark is here with Ursaluna, so we can just burn you or you can Terra Fire. So I found that I didn't really need it. And then also Terraing Fairy, the Sinistra, was like, oh, late game Goldango, Make It Rain just does so much damage. And it was just, it was really punishing. So change to water for that very reason. It means in front of a Goldango, I can lead Sinistra Ursaluna. And if they have something like Incineroar, Goldango, I can, unless they fake out the Sinistra, which they can, but then they've left the Luna alone. They sort of in that game, in that board position, I have Luna and Sinistra. I just don't protect the Luna. I go for Headlong Rush into the Incineroar or the Goldango, and then I Terra Water, and then go into Trick Room. And then he had, and then I did take off. So I didn't know the item. He had Rocky Helmet. That was part of the Strength Sap play for LAIC. It was part of Tera Fairy was also to deal with Dondozo. And there just weren't that many of them around. They were around, but also
not very many of them.
Yeah, not very many of them. Not enough to justify the 2 items. Rocky Helmet is really good. And I actually did, part of the game plan with Rocky Helmet was it really punishes Focus Sash Sneasler. You can Rage Powder, have them break their own Sash, and then Luna can just pick them up. Or Archaludon can just pick them up. And so that was actually quite good in LAIC. So the Rocky Helmet was good, but I changed to the Terra Water and the Citrus Berry because I really wanted to have like a more hard Trick Room mode. And so also in the stats, I changed Sinistra's. So in LAIC, Sinistra had a bit more defense. He'd hit the bump that got him 166. And I changed that in this team because the Arcanine was gone and I was weaker into fire, and I did the Kelk, and Sinistra with 140 special defense, Terraing Water, Sun, Typhlosion using Overheat with Choice Specs in Sun. I think it lives. It might be a roll, but I think it's like a roll in my favor.
Okay.
And it was very specific. Once I took out Arcanine, I knew I had to have lines into Sun that were a bit strange, and this was one of them. Just having the Sinistra being able to, basically the aim was I knew all the Ursalunas were faster than mine, so get into Trick Room, put Ursaluna there, have Pelipper in the back to stop the Torkoal from punishing you, and then get rid of the rest of the team. Get rid of the Jump Bluff, get rid of the Ursaluna, and then just deal with Torkoal and Charizard, with Archaludon and Pelipper.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Obviously, mons like those Sun Cores can just deal ridiculous amounts of damage, and especially when you got a mon like Jump Bluff out there clicking Sunny Day, it's definitely not the easiest thing in the world to keep your weather up. As it does, I believe, speed tie Zoroark and outspeeds the rest of your team, right? So there's very little counterplay to just like switching. You can't really just switch in Pelipper, I guess, as they just click Sunny Day.
Yeah, and that was also so Marco's son. That also changed why Arcanine was there when I think Marco released the spreads, or they were talked about. I was following very closely, and I saw that Jumpluff wasn't max speed.
I remember seeing it
And
had a
then-
little less.
Yeah, and when I realized that, I was like, oh, hold on. Pelipper can switch in, Zoroark can taunt, and then the Jumpluff has to switch out. Like, even if you
Yeah.
get Torkoal to reset the sun, like, Jumpluff isn't doing anything. And
Yeah.
against Marco's son, it was I sort of realized going into Perth that basically, unless I'm versing like some of the creators of the team, knowing that my basically game plan for Perth and the GC, which I did play a Sun team in the GC and it was very tight, but part of that game plan was you have to be max speed and a lot of you aren't. And I understand why, like it's already so fast and it's almost always in Sun. So yeah, knowing that, I was like, okay, I just gonna have to sort of skill diff Sun players. And having Sinister be Tera Water meant that I was sort of in a better position to do that.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And then Volcarona, he was there. This team actually did start struggling into, and I did lose. I lost in Perth. One of the first game I played versus Sam Pandalis, and he had Indeedee Sneasler, Electabuzz, Ursaluna Blood Moon.
The standard Talonflame, right? Or did he not have
Talon? Yeah, Talonflame. And so actually and I watched Carson's team report on that team, and one of the things I picked up on is that he said, like, so often are we leading Electabuzz and Ursaluna Blood Moon, and basically there's not a lot in the meta that can really deal with Blood Moon, but Volcarona with Covert Cloak, like the special defense and the Quiver Dance just allows you to get ahead of it. And Talonflame is quite good, but Talonflame's he struggles into the rest of the team, like Pelipper, Archaludon.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so it's still a hard game plan, but especially for both Perth and the GC, my game plan was against that team, just try, if they favor the Ursaluna Blood Moon mode, just try and get Volcarona in a good position, or have Archaludon. Basically, I have to call the 50-50. If they're going for Hyper Voice or Blood Moon, I have to not Tera, and if they're going for Earth Power, I have to Tera. And then once I've snarled, Sinister can help you recover whatever damage you took, and the snarl just reduces Ursaluna's output by so much that you can start to get in an advantageous position. So it's sort of Volcarona was part of one mode, so one mode to beat Ursaluna Blood Moon, and Archaludon was the other part, and having two modes into it, given that it had just won a regional, was really important.
I mean, it just won another one.
Yeah, right, it did. Yeah, exactly.
Pretty sure Ollie ran the exact same team, so it's showing, especially those AV sets, they're very scary.
Yeah, that's right. So, and I'll say this, against AV, and I think it was I versed a lot of AV Grimace-style. So Grimace-style was with the AV Blood Moon originally, early in the format, and Snarl just made that matchup so much easier.
Just really slowed it down, I guess, and just it was able to it enables you to stall out the screens, I guess.
Yeah, it's a different. I find Ursaluna is a different mon depending on its item, and Assault vs Snarl deals with you. Life Orb, it's harder, and Snarl doesn't do nearly as much, but you get a lot more frailty, so you just really have to, tap it and then, tap it again and it's down. Whereas AV, the game plan with this is just like, snarl, heal. Sinister and Archaludon stop going down, then they have to pivot out and you can start to get a little bit more momentum.
Yeah.
But and then the Volk set's pretty. I did experiment. I tried Tera Water, but basically, I think
Fair is really good, right?
Yeah, Fairy's just really good. There's I'm obviously didn't come up with this. This was all over the meta, and it was all over the meta because it's really good.
Yeah, really
It gives
consistent as
you,
well.
yeah, it just gives you a good hit into
Genie,
Dragonite.
Gambit.
Yeah, and so it means you can sort of set up without risking them, have something that come in the back and just pop you. Sneasel is a bit of a problem, but you just have to work around that
Yeah.
and not tear it too early.
Yeah, and look, you got Cloak as well, right? So it's not the end of the world. You can take the Die Claws
Yeah.
if necessary.
Yeah, if I've not teared, the Sneasler doesn't really want to be in front of it. Like it's just going for Dire Claws. Like they still do a lot. But then if I get the burn off, it's such a nice
Yeah.
position for them.
Get the burn, Sinister comes in, you're all good.
Yeah, basically, yeah, that's right. So yeah, and the spreads, this is a classic spread I really like on Volk. You hit the bump on 176, the speed, you are faster than Dragonite.
Does that speed tie Sneasler at +1? Jolly Sneasler?
Wait, no.
No, sorry, I've maths
No.
wrong. No, you don't.
No,
Go
no,
first.
I think it's like 199.
I did the math and thought it was 189. I'm like, hold on.
No, yeah, it's
Missing 10.
I'm pretty sure it's 199.
Yeah, it is,
and
yeah.
so yeah, and so it just so in well, actually, I'll talk about one of my favorite leads with this team, which is classic Zoroark, is and I did this at Perth. I pulled it off once, and then I played Joji, and I tried to pull it off, and he immediately called me on it, which was unfortunate. But basically, whenever I see Dragonite and Zoroark in Game 3 or in a GC with this team, and if you play it on ladder, you just Icy Wind, Tera Fairy. It's so bold, but you kill the Dragonite.
Yeah.
Because the Icy Wind is super effective, break the multi-scale, and then
one-shot it.
Yeah, and that play exists. Part of my Zoroark build is often trying to hide the initial offense. And so if you see a Sinistra there, you might think, oh, okay, maybe Archaludon, maybe he wants to go into Trick Room, or if it's or I'll lead. One of my favorite leads is Archaludon with this team and Volcarona, and it's like fab, great. Which one is Zoroark?
Do you want to hit? It's such a weird combo, right?
Yeah. Do you want to hit like Zoroark's there, but which one is it? Yeah. Am I about to play for the rain mode, or am I about to play for my setup? And against Ursaluna Blood Moon Electabuzz, if it is Volk, it invalidates it because I taunt the Electabuzz and I get off Quiver Dance guaranteed, and then the best they can do is go for Terra normal Blood Moon into Volk, which does do damage, but the Electabuzz just goes for Electro Web, and often they'll split it, and this is what you want them to do. You want them to go Hyper Voice Electro Web, because you're not getting the damage off into Volk. You're killing the Zoroark, but then Sinistra's coming in. Volk's healed. Now Volk's a problem. Sinistra doesn't mind. He can just switch out into Archaludon, and you start to get off to the races, and unless they make big calls, it can get out of hand because you actually aren't that bad.
Dealers kind of going crazy there.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of my favorite modes with this team. If I get it off when I see, and when Dragonite was raising in prominence, it was so fabulous. Like Icy Wind, no one's using it, and I'm like, everyone has Dragonite, and it's not that great because he's running Scale Shot, so he can KO you and get rid of the speed drop. But that's why you have the instant pop, forcing them to
just go Tera Fairy and remove it type thing.
And that's the thing. Once they Tera Fairy, that's okay. That's an okay trade. He said losing his game to Joji that called him on it immediately.
Yeah.
But
Joji's an incredible player. Yeah. If anyone's gonna call it, it's him, man.
Yeah. So it's but most of the time you can just basically dismantle a whole game plan.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. Which is why the Volk was such a useful ad. And then the Volt just once again hitting the bump. There's nothing other than that. That was as much defense as I could put in, but I find hitting 100 takes most attacks. Like you'll take an extreme speed every now and again, like when you're below half and things like that. So it's a nice spread.
And then is there anything else for that team, sorry, or do we want to touch on the final variant before we go to the run?
Let's touch on the final variant.
That's just the GC version, right? There's just best of one text, I believe.
Yeah, it's just best of one text. So I think in the version we just set up, what I will say is in the Perth version, I think I had the wrong berry, but basically Sinistcha gets the citrus berry, and that's why I also dropped his defense. So when I was in LAIC, Sinistcha was just living. Sinistcha was just, he was
Thick
living.
boy.
He was a big, thick boy, and Diaclaw did less than half. And with Rocky Helmet, and I had Strength Sap on him, it was crazy. He just, there were times that he lived on one and then would Strength Sap a Sneasler, and then I'd be like, great, throw 5 Diaclaws into me. Like, I'm gonna wake up eventually. So he was kind of wild with that. And then Rocky Helmet sort of added this mode where I entered an end game where they had Sneasler and Rillaboom, and I just was like, yeah, it's game. It's game. Like, you have to sleep this turn, otherwise Sneasler will drop his attack, I'll get full health, and you'll just eventually KO both your Mons going into me, which is such a weird end game, but basically Sinistcha can 2-0 them because they just can't get off the damage, and I do love Strength Sap, but
just death by 1,000 cuts, they're just killing themselves as you keep healing it back.
yeah, it's amazing. And then it's kind of crazy when you're versing a Sneasler and you're like, I want you, you can get the sleep. Like, I don't care now. Like, this game is over. Which feels so nice. But yeah, basically for Perth, I dropped that defense because ironically, Diaclaw doesn't get him down to half if he has it. Okay. Whereas if he doesn't have it, things like Throat Chop and then Diaclaw, they start to do a bit more. They start to proc the Citrus Berry more often, whereas the defensive version doesn't. And for the GC, yeah, kept the special defense, but changed the item to Mental Herb because Mental Herb is insane, which is really good. Like, Mental Herb just insane in the GC. It's mainly, yeah, there's Taunt, but actually Whimsicott.
Encore as well is probably a big one, right?
Yeah, like Whimsicott often in the GC, I always find really high up. They have this game plan where you go into Trick Room and they encore you, and I think they think they're being really clever because they're letting you go into Trick Room and then they're just going to force you to take yourself out. But then you have Mental Herb and that's the game. But yeah, this team is then weaker into Dondozo, which in the GC is harder. But by the GC and Perth, I developed a really good game plan into Dondozo with this team. And if anyone ever tries it out, basically the game plan is if it's 2/2/2 Dozo, you lead Zoroark and you lead Archaludon. You know in the end game you're just going to be using Draco Meteors. So it doesn't matter that you waste the first turn because Dozo's going to be oblivious. And then use Zoroark to catch out their extra mode. So if it's Sneasler, you burn it. If it's Dragonite, you burn it. If it's Talonflame, you just put it down with Draco Meteor and then you deal with whatever's next to it. If it's Goldango, you Bitter Malice it.
Yeah.
And then that's turn one. And then the next turn is, okay, so you've kind of wounded their other mode. So if it's Size Spam, you Snarled, and Icy Winded or Burned. And then after that, you're like, okay, I've got to beat Dozo. And then basically you've Terra'd Archaludon Psychic. You have Ursaluna and Sinistcha to beat it. And how you end up beating Dondozo is you just keep throwing Dracons in, get Luna in, Luna Facades, Sinistcha heals up if it's protecting. And basically, depending on how familiar they are, they'll try and get rid of Archaludon and Ursaluna. And if they've done that, you've won the game because they can never get rid of it fast enough before you can go into Trick Room again.
Yeah.
And then you're back in, and then Luna and or Archaludon will be able to finish on Dozo the second time round. And then normally, if it's Arch, you have enough body presses that Tatsu can be taken out. And if it's Luna, well, Luna just eats Tatsugiri.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Just so that's. I had a really clear game plan into Dozo that I built when I lost Strength Sap, because against Strength Sap, when your Tera Fairy Strength Sap is just crazy.
Yeah, it's probably just free, right?
You Tera Fairy, and then they have to target
up,
slot. And then you're just like, yeah, it's fine though, because I'll weaken you, and then you can't pop the other slot, and it just gets really, really fun really quickly.
Yeah. One thing I will throw out there as well, it is actually cool to hear you talk so much about Archaludon without Pelipper. Because as someone who like basically refused to run Rain for the entire format, I kind of just think of the two of them as, you know, best buddies. And And when I have run Archaludon myself, it's normally been like power herb stuff. So to hear you like talk about all these I guess combos where like Pelipper's not even there, I think it is really cool.
Yeah,
it's good to see a lot of synergy where it doesn't need rain to actually do its stuff. So
yeah, and that's also part of why it was good into rain. So when you're versing the rain matchup, so like against the Basque Legion stuff, I feel really confident because I go, okay, I get an extra mon. You have to take Pelipper, and your Pelipper hates my Archaludon, and I didn't bring my Pelipper. And look, it is tough because in the second game, and stronger players will realize, like, actually, his Archaludon really likes being in rain. I'm not going to bring it. They're not going to bring it, and then it can be a little bit slow. But yeah, like Ursaluna is really great into their Archaludon. It's still tough. It could, like, rain on rain is not, rain on rain violence is not an ideal matchup.
Yeah.
But it definitely it's a bit of skill deffing, but I always found that, like, no matter, even if you run full rain, like when you verse the mirror, you kind of do just have to play better.
Yeah.
You can't really take it out too much to beat it, because then you also sacrifice your other matchups.
Yeah. And I guess as well, the only other GC tech I can see here is goggles on the Volk. I'm guessing that's obviously just to patch up some of your Mungus problems.
Oh, yes. The goggles on the Volk. Wait, I'm trying to remember. Did I keep that for the GC? Sorry, I think I sent you because I was testing it. No, I took it off, and I'll tell you why.
Going back to Cloak. Actually, I've probably got it here, don't I?
Yeah. Yeah, I took it off.
Right one? No.
And I can't believe I haven't spoken about this. Yeah, Zoroark is there for Amoongus as well. We haven't mentioned it because I didn't verse many in Perth, but Zoroark into Amoongus is really nice. And he's really nice because you just taunt him.
And then he's useless.
And then he's just like, oh no, I'll hit you with Pollen Buff. And I'm like, it's resisted. And yeah, they're just breaking the sash. So that's all they need to do. But that turn that they thought they were going to spore, they didn't spore.
And that's huge.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where this Zoroark really does shine. Like, what a lot of people try and just have it do massive offense, but this Zoroark, the way I've built it and the way I use it is, you are trying to disable their tech that they're trying to use to disable you. Whether it's Electabuzz taunting Volk or it's Amoongus sporing Volk, you taunt them. You tell them, go away. I'm done with that. And
I guess to throw it out there as well, do you ever find yourself taunting Incineroars?
Yep.
Yeah, I love that on the fighting shot. Nothing better.
It's a tricky play in OTS.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier in the GC. It's so much easier in the GC. For example, I had a game in the GC where I just nuked their Goldango. They had Incin. They went for knockoff. And then, so I was on 1 health, and they were trying to reposition, and I knew they would. So I was like, all right, we'll taunt. And yeah, Zoroark went down that turn, and I was like, this is excellent. Here's Pelipper. And they were really betting on getting the pivot. And taunting, it's a tricky play, because if you taunt and they just go for knockoff again or flare blitz or something like that, like, you didn't do anything. But yeah, often Zoroark wants to pivot. Incineroar wants to pivot around, and it is really good. Like, taunt is really disruptive, and I would say it's probably the best move on Zoroark, because when you use it correctly, you've really stuffed up their game plan. And from there, you take your advantage. You have to take it, but you do take it.
Yeah, no, I can see the power of it, right? It's just, there's so much utility this move gets, and especially when it's coming from a mon that you don't expect it from, right? If, again, you disguise this thing as an Ursaluna, and then an Ursaluna taunts you, it's like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
And yeah, and this comes back to what we were talking about earlier about, like, hiding taunt. I could give another mon taunt, but once you use it, you normally know it's a Zoroark anyway, and that's why this moveset doesn't hide. itself, it gets one shot, you reveal it, and then you're off to the races.
I mean, yeah, that one turn can be the difference between winning and losing a game, right? Catching them, you know, as you said, right, Ice Beam into Tera Blast onto a D-Knight, super scary, right? Obviously, getting a burn onto a Gambit or a D-Knight again, super scary. Taunting an Amoonguss, you get that one turn right, and I feel like it changes the whole, you know, outlook of the game.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I think that's all
for the
specifics
team.
of the team.
I will show the rentals as well, for if anyone wants to use them. I believe I've got them in order of LAIC. Name is crossed out because it was incorrect in the box, but I believe this is Perth, and then this one here is the GC. So
I've realized that my LIC one doesn't have strength stat, but
is it
to be honest, no, but to be honest, Life Dew is better.
It is better? Yeah. I mean, the utility you get for healing up Arch, right? It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I went into LIC, and even though, as I said, I had some funny games where I was able to 2v1, Life Dew in both the GC and in Perth.
Just the consistency, right, is insane.
Yeah, it really was a lot better, and I'll go through my LIC run, but there was one game where if I had it, I would have had a far easier matchup and probably would have been able to give it a better crack at winning it, because I versed Victor Medina, and having strength stat versus Life Dew, it made his game plan so much easier than mine, because it meant like I had to keep switching, whereas he just had to have Sinister out, and it really made it hard for me to play it, which was unfortunate. But yeah, maybe we go into the runs and I can sort of talk about a few different games.
Easy. So I've got the LAIC run here where you went 7-3, losing to Eduardo Cunha, I guess, in the win and in, right, for day 2. Obviously, incredibly talented player, one of the best in the world. So, and also a win against Gabe Agadi as well. So that's a pretty rough day 2, actually. Agadi into Eduardo. So, yeah, I guess tell us whatever you want. If you need me to click into any individual games to pull up some more information, let me know.
I'll start.
We'll go from there.
I remember all these pretty. So I'll start with like my first game, and that was against how basically. So I remember like key parts on how this game went, and basically this was my first game, and he had a rough time with Zoroark. He clearly, his rain matchup was very tough. Like he had Garchomp there, but basically I was really able to take advantage of Zoroark in both games. In the first game, he led Dragonite and Dragonite and Sneasler, and I was able to burn the Dragonite. And then against Garchomp's so hard to lead against Zoroark because Icy Wind just chunks it.
Yeah, too much damage.
And then in the second game, he did adapt quite well. Like he had Tera Fire, so I was scared to use Will-O-Wisp, but he wasn't really able to. And he led Incineroar, which is so good into Zoroark. But after that, I was able to just kind of go into my rain mode. And this is the thing, like it's really hard. The first time you ever verse Zoroark, that first game, I'm really gonna punish you for not knowing how to play it. Which is exactly what I did. And then in the second game, he's very much an optional. Yeah. Because if I've scared you in the first game, the thing is I know how you want to readjust, and you are just working it out on the fly, and that gives me the advantage. So I was able to get ahead. The second game is far more interesting, and that's against Patrick Connors.
Yeah, I will say, sorry to cut you off here. Looking at your run, dude, Pat Con, you've got Michael Kelch, Nick Donnelly, Victor Mendina. Like, dude, this run is stacked, man, the whole way through. Absolutely insane.
When I went to LIC, I knew I could face good trainers. Like, obviously,
didn't think it was like I'm going.
I knew it was, and I'm just sitting there every round that loads up, and I'm like, what's happening? Like, Patrick Connors, like, when his name came up on my Arcanine, and I was like, I know that name. Oh my god, he just won the last international.
Yeah, he won the NAIZ, didn't he? 2024.
Yeah, he did.
Insane.
He did, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be so tricky. And yeah, basically, I lost the first, and it was such a mental game after that. I remember in the moment, I was like, no, I'm versing Patrick Connors. Like, I came here to play Pokemon. I came here to win. And in the first, he was just able to he was just really aggressive. And I burned his Archaludon first turn, and I can't remember this off the top of my head, but I think he just went for Bullet Seed basically. And he called the Zoroark and basically like took advantage. And even though I got the burn off, like I'd lost too much positioning.
Yeah.
But in the second game, I played I played it a bit differently, and I actually went for the Rillaboom. I burned it. Therefore the Bullet Seed didn't pick me up, and then I was able to sort of, and I don't have the exact terms, but basically I was able to put myself in a position where Sinistcha, and that was one where I was able to put myself in a position where Sinistcha just stood next to the Rillaboom and said, "Come at me, bro."
Yeah.
And then I was able to deal with the rest of the Mons. Even a Basculegion. I think the end game basically I rage powdered a Basculegion's last respects to then KO it.
Oh, with Rocky Helmet.
Yeah, no, with Electro Shot.
Sorry,
because because I'd redirected it.
Yeah.
He couldn't just KO the Tera Psychic.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then in the last game, basically, and this is the strength of the team, I made a really hard read and this was probably one of my most clutch survivals. I made a hard read. He wasn't respecting the Ursaluna, and he was worried about the Will-O-Wisp on the Arch because he had a Bullet Seed into like an aggressive Arch play. So I just said, "Nah, you're not going to lead Arch, Rillaboom," and I led Luna, and he led Rillaboom and Basculegion, and I just knew in that moment, I'm like, "Yep, I've got this." And I terrored the Ursaluna, and I headlong rushed the Bass, I think, and he last respect, and this was frightening because he had Life Orb on Basculegion, and he wood hammered the Sinistcha, and Sinistcha said, "Yep, not today." Lived on 7 health, and I think we were both like, "Oh, I didn't think he could do that." I was more confident because last respect was at 50.
Yeah.
But it's a Life Orb, Basculegion. Like it's doing so much damage. And so I really wasn't sure of the calc. But because it wasn't adaptability, I was like, no, I'm pretty sure. Like you're just so bulky, Sinistcha. And then after that, we went into the Trick Room, and it was just it became very much. I was just able to, because then I was able to strength sap the Rillaboom. And just start firing off headlong rushes into the other slot, and then in the end game, Rillaboom just can't win. But it was a really tight game, and after it, he was super nice. It was actually really nice to meet him, and he said, I think I just win. I think he said like, if I lead the first lead into you, if I lead Arch Rilla, I think that's just game, isn't it?" And I'm like, yeah, if you set up, it's really hard, but I just had to call that you wouldn't. Yeah. And that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
The next game, he was Esteban. He was really nice. He had never played Zoroark. He called the judge over because I used Taunt in the first turn, and he was like, "Oh, sorry, you got a team sheet error." And this happens so much in tournaments. And I go, "No, it's." And even before he's revealed, I'm like, "It's not Archaludon. Like it's Zoroark." And he's like,
so funny, man.
He's like, "Oh," and it happens. It happens all the time, because you get and I don't know. I think everyone gets this way. Like you get so locked in to thinking about all the variables, and then suddenly you forget that's not Archaludon.
Yeah, I did something at Perth as well where I forgot Unburden Sneasel with Sash, and it cost me a game.
Yeah, like it happens. Yeah. You're just so locked in. You're just thinking. You're thinking about the ability, you're thinking about all the moves, and you just miss that one thing.
Yeah.
And then basically, he went for close combat into Ursaluna, and then Ursaluna lived, and I KO'd after that. And basically the game got out of hand because I had taunted his King Gambit.
His Gambit. Okay.
Yeah, I taunted his King Gambit going to Sword Dance.
Yeah.
So he really didn't have a second play because he then had to deal with Zoroark, and he knew the Will-O-Wisp was coming down, and he brought who did he have in the back? Yeah, I think he had Rillaboom or Dragonite. So it was sort of like he had Sneasler and King Gambit, something like that up, and it was sort of like everything doesn't want to be Will-O-Wisp. And then the second game, it's really hard sometimes for people to recover once they've been Zoroarked.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think I might have taunted his Volk. And then he didn't get off the Quiver Dance, and then I was able to sort of do Archaludon-y things with Electro Shot later in the game. So that was really tricky. But it was a nice, neat game, and he was everyone at LIC was super lovely. I would really recommend if you're ever thinking of an international, like LIC was actually really nice. Michael Kelsch, I was so salty. Game 1, he led King Gambit, I led Luna, and I just Terra'd Fairy and headlonged his King Gambit and took it out immediately first turn. And I could see the look on his face. He was like, what? Because it was such a safe lead. Like it was such a bold lead. Like he was so sure the Protect was coming down the line. But unfortunately, I got cocky and started playing too passively, and then he got his Magmar in, and I thought I might be able to live the overheat.
On which one?
On Sinistcha.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got into Trick Room, was healing up, and I'm like, I live this overheat. And then at the end, he told me, no, it's modest, you don't live it. And I was like, oh damn. But what was funny is he missed in the next game. I was actually doing quite well, but so in the first game, that's right, he missed overheat. And so I didn't switch out. And then I was like, I'll leave it in. Like, it's fine. It will live one. It didn't. And I was like, uh-oh. And then that set me back so far because I just miscalculated and I was just being really passive. And then in the second game, I had a really good game plan. I got Ursaluna in position. I was in rain. He'd used overheat into Archaludon. No, that's right. I had Archaludon out. I switched Archaludon out. I'd gotten he'd taken overheat, and basically the end game was I was going to get Ursaluna into Trick Room against his team, and all Sinistcha had to do was get off Trick Room. And in front of him was a Sneasler and a Magma. And I was like, it's fine. Rain is on. I'll just go into Trick Room. And in my mind, I was like, even if he Dire Claws, he'll use overheat and it just won't do that much because he's 2 down in rain. And then he gets the Dire Claw sleep, and then he gets the overheat critical hit.
Oh, no.
And he was like, yeah, because the Dire Claw was doing not that much that I think I could have lived
the overheat.
I could have gotten close that he would have had to throw both in next turn again.
Yeah.
But because he put it to sleep and then he got the crit, it was on red, so he basically just was able to pivot.
Yeah.
And so it was really funny though, because I was like, oh, I think I had you in game 3. I really wanted to play you. And Michael, he's such a lovely guy, but he's like, I don't want to play this team again. This was horrible. Which was really funny because, he's such a good player, but at the time, you always go to a tournament and you build a weird team. You're thinking like, is this a good team? But by then I was like, okay, I nearly beat Michael. I was actually in a really good position. This is a good team.
Yeah.
And so you get more confident. It was a shame because I think if I had have bested Michael, maybe I would have gotten on stream, and I never have been. So it was an aspiration. But
really cool.
That'll be another day. And yeah, Nick Donnelly, Arcanine. Yeah, that's all I'll say to that one. Arcanine
just went in that game.
Yep, it just went in, and it was, yeah. He tried. He wanted Typhlosion, Arcanine. Basically, the whole, even without the Volk, Arcanine, Icy Wind, Snarl. He tried in the first game, with the Macro and the Typhlosion. but I hid Zoroark as Arcanine, so he just didn't feel like it was viable, and
Yeah.
I was basically just able to slowly chip, and I was able to sort of switch in Palipar and just electroshot the macro and just disable the game plan. And I think in the end, in the first one, he just had Sneasler and Indeedee in the back, and it was like, yeah, this is useless against Tera Psychic. Like he was good, but basically that team has really three modes, and it's Indeedee, Sneasler, it's Macro, Typhlosion, it's Electabuzz, Ursaluna, and when I have three Mons on the field in the first turn, I have Zoroark, Archaludon, and Hisuian Arcanine is hiding in Zoroark, and you don't know which. It becomes nearly impossible to disable the team because you want to throw a close combat to try and pick up the Archaludon. If it's Zoroark, you get nothing. If it's Arcanine, it might be Tera Bug. If it's Archaludon, it might be Tera Psychic. So he just had such a hard time. And because of that, yeah, the team was able to do really well into him. And that was really good. And then Victor Medina. Yeah, I mean, Victor Medina, I couldn't stop him. He the first game went on for like 20 turns. I burnt his Archaludon, but he burnt mine in response with Matcha Gotcha. And
classic.
Yeah, and then in the second game, I really struggled into this team. I didn't have a specific game plan, but after the fact, it's just really hard. The Goldango is really pesky, being faster than Zoroark. He's able to catch me out with a Make It Rain.
And he was also Scarf, right?
Yeah, he was Scarf, and he's able to trick Archaludon and then like lock me into a move, which in the end game can be so deadly when he has a bulky Archaludon. So unfortunately, I just didn't have a good enough game plan into him. I hadn't respected the team enough. I think my game plan in the second one was to try and brute force it, but it's really hard with Archaludon trying to brute force Archaludon because basically he choice scarfed my Assault Vest, and then I locked into Electro Shot, and it just eventually he was just able to wear me down and just got ahead. So yeah, that's losing to Victor Medina. Like, he didn't make a mistake, and he, I think, had the better matchup.
Yeah.
Maddie, all I'll say about this game is I probably shouldn't have made day two. Maddie, he won the first, I won the second, and why I'd say day two nearly vanished, sort of washed through my fingers, is he called me out first turn. He led Gastrodon Incineroar, and he knocked off and earth-powered my Archaludon. And I could see it happening, and I was like, oh no, this piece is so important to getting off damage against his team. And so after that, like, I had to play like an insane person with the Gastrodon there. Like, Palipar came in and I had Zoroark, and Zoroark was untouched, and I taunted his Gastro because I thought he'd go for Yawn. So I knew I could hit the Gastro for great damage consistently, but I didn't know how to beat the rest of the team, basically.
Yeah.
I found my line. Basically, I threw a bit of Malice into Gastro. I threw a Hurricane, and I said, there's the line. It's Gastro being confused by Hurricane, so he doesn't just KO Zoroark. And he did. And I was like, all right, I got to go for it. No, I've got to go for it again. And I did. And this time I got the confusion. And by then, I'm down to Palipar and Sinister. And I am like, this isn't how it's going to end, is it? And I found the line. And I confused the Gastrodon to then have it, not hit Ice Beam, to then go into Trick Room to have Hurricane take it out. I then was able to, I can't remember how I removed the Incineroar, but basically the end game came down to, I had to confuse Gastrodon. It had to hit itself, so 30% chance, then a 30% chance. I then went into Trick Room, used Matcha Gotcha. Gastrodon got burnt, so it was an extra 20%, which helped chip it to death. He then brought in his Volcarona. I then had to hit it with Hurricane outside of rain. It then had to confuse itself so it didn't hit the Sinister. Then Rillaboom. So I should go back one step. So I got into Trick Room. Yeah, the turn he brought in Volcarona, I think I just entered Trick Room. And I was like, yep, I have to hit Hurricane and I have to confuse it. And it did get confused. Therefore, it didn't hit Sinister. Sinister used Strength Sap into his Rillaboom, which lowered its attack, which meant it couldn't KO Palapa. And then I was like, yep, this is the end game now. And the next turn, he went for Protect to protect the Volcarona. And he got confused, hit itself, then Hurricane hit, killing the Volt. And then Sinister could 1v1 the Rillaboom. And it was awful to find the line. But I was like, yep, you got the play right, but I just have to hit these moves and I have to get lucky.
Look, it paid off in the end, hey?
I mean, it was like a 5-turn, and I think I've got the order wrong, but I remember writing it down after the thing. It was something crazy. Like, it was insane how many 30% I needed, and I got them.
Yeah.
But you find the line.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you got to go for it. Like we both saw what happened to Bryce on the weekend. The 1 in 2,000 chance to lose, and
it'll
sometimes
happen.
it happens. Yeah, it's the game we play, sadly.
And then finally my final winning in against Alex. It was a really hard game. It was really unfortunate. We had a disconnect. I had 2 mons left. He had 3. And I know he was confident he had it. I wasn't so sure. I had Sinister and Archaludon, and he had like a mix of Rillaboom and Ninetales.
Okay.
And I can't remember the last mon, but basically the game cut out, and so the judge called it a draw because we weren't so disadvantaged, and I don't understand exactly what goes into calling it a draw, but he did. And then in the second game, he won. And then in the third game, I was able to get into a position where he had to double hit Blizzard, and he missed Sinister. And then Sinister was able to put me in Trick Room, and then it was game. And I could tell and his team was really wild, and I was not feeling confident because basically he was hyper aggressive, and it was the first time ever I'd played Sudden Death. And because we'd both won 1, we entered Sudden Death, and I was sitting there like, oh my god, my first day 2 will be decided on a Sudden Death match against a team that has choice Scarf, Basculegion. It's got choice Band, Arcanine. It's got Miracle Seed, Grass Tera, Rillaboom. Like, it's got Como O throwing off scale shots. Like, it had so much offense, and I was so panicked. And basically the lead was, from me, Palapa, Zoroark hiding as Archaludon, and his was Como O and Rillaboom. And we had played this game once in the round before, and basically it's a call. You fake out the Palapa and go for Clangorous Skull, not Clangorous Soul. You go for Clangorous Soul, but you actually go for Clangorous Scales because you're in Sudden Death. And then if you catch the Zoroark, then you just pick it up next turn with Glassy Glide. So that's one game plan. Or you just go for, which I guessed is what he was going to do, or you know that you're faster than Palapa, you just go Clangorous Scales and you Tera Grass and go for Grassy Glide. And that's what he did. And I called him on it. I Terra'd Palapa at this point. Palapa he remained Grass the whole time during this run. Like in terms of during Perth and the GC. I Terra'd Grass, so the Grassy Glide didn't do enough. Clangorous Souls just missed the KO, and I knew because he was on Assault Vest, he couldn't take the Hurricane. And that was a really sad way for him to go out. But at the end of the day, we kind of just played a single game of 50-50s, and I called them right.
Yeah, look, I've been in a win in Sudden Death before, and it really should be removed. I think like it's not the game we play. You know what I mean? Going for that first KO is completely different to actually winning a game. So
yeah, and it felt for me, considering he had so much offense, it felt so hard.
Mm.
And you know what? Palapa and Zoroark as a lead is kind of frightening because if they work out at Zoroark, where's your damage?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
where is your damage? And he did call that. Well, he didn't call it. He just kind of ignored it. But I also think it was the right lead from him because basically Arch can't KO either of them. He was always basically. I think he was betting that I wasn't going to lead Arch, otherwise Drakon could KO
The yeah.
the the
Komodo.
Como, and in previous games he'd often teared it fire. So it was really interesting. But then was able to pull through. Felt like a movie moment though to have to do that, like actually when everything's on the line. And then day two was
Mr. Gabagadi.
Agadi, my first time ever getting the team sheet early. It was actually really lovely because I didn't know. It was my first day too, and I'd never real I'd not known you got the team sheet early. And it was Maddie, my opponent, in the 7th round. He actually came up to me and said, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just waiting for my pairing." And he said, "Yeah, the pairings are up, and so is the team sheet."
Oh,
And I was
jeez.
like, "Oh, I didn't realize." And so it was, I don't know, for me it was a bit of a different game because I had a chance to study his team sheet. Fortunately, this team is really built to beat balance.
Yeah.
And I had an excellent game against you, Gabrielle. Like, he's a really lovely guy. But basically I identified that his team's key to winning against me was you KO the Palapa early, and then after that you just start slowly taking away the pieces because he's got that big choice spec Dracul Meteor. Like, you KO the Palapa, then you switch it out, and then you use it to KO the Archaludon or get it in range of other KOs, and then after that you sweep. So I identified that, and I knew my first game plan was lead Palapa Archaludon. No, lead Palapa Zoroark, and just wheel with the Sneasler, protect the Palapa. Actually, no, I think I went for Terra Stella, but and then just took out the Dragapult. But yeah, it was a really tense game, but I was able to identify a really good game plan. And Gabriel was super nice at the end of it. He was like, I don't remember the last time I got wrecked so badly. But yeah, this team might, like, this Zoroark team, if I can see what you want to do, Zoroark becomes so much more powerful because it means it becomes this piece that I can hide it as anything else in the team, and it can just disrupt that game plan instantly, like with a snap of my fingers. And then after that, I can start removing the pieces. And yeah, it went down basically straight away like that. And it was a really good game. Like, he didn't give it to me every single inch I took, but yeah, it was quite a. I really found the right game plan for that, which was good. But then obviously finally versing
Eduardo.
Eduardo Edu, I think I was a bit taken back that I'd just beaten Gabrielle. And to be honest, when I saw his team sheet, Covert Cloak Blood Moon, I
Oh, is
was
that
like,
what it was? No way.
I saw it and
Oh,
I was
yeah, the
like,
yawn stuff.
the snarl doesn't do anything. I can't, like, what am I doing against this thing? Like, I can never KO it in one. I know it's going to be bulky. And then it sort of just, it made my game plan to deal with Blood Moon very frustrated. And yeah, Edu got my number in the second one. I panicked. I played too passive. And with this team, you really only get to play passive, I find, in a best of 3 when you're in the lead. And I led Sinister Ursaluna almost out of desperation. And Edu just called it. He threw a Shadow Ball into the Sinister and led Goldango. And I'll always regret the fact that had I led Zoroark, it's a Terra Stella to take out the Goldango piece. And then after that, it actually becomes very achievable.
Yeah.
But in the first game, he had protected his Goldango and he hadn't played it aggressively. So in the second game, when he switched it up, I just didn't have that mode ready for him. And then unfortunately, it was quite horrible. He got himself in a position where he had 3 fake outers, and he just kept
Cycle jar.
pivoting them out and fake outing Ursaluna to death.
Dude.
As Sinister sat there going, there's Goldango in the back. I can 1v3 all these physical mons. Like, I'll say this, Incineroar is very difficult, but it's possible. You just need to defeat the Goldango Ursaluna, and Ursaluna just went, I am so frightened of everything as he got hit in the face. I think he got hit in the, like, he faked out Ursaluna something crazy like 6 times. And it was, but obviously he said to me, he was like, I've never done that before. I've never KO'd an Ursaluna with fake out. And I was like, yep, that's literally the only move you used on it. But eventually, and this was also a great detriment of not having life due. Sinister, once he's trapped with Ursaluna, really isn't able to provide that much extra support.
Yeah. Nah, that fake out cycling, dude. I've been there. Like early format when I was playing Brady Smith's team, it was just, if you ever caught a Dozo with those 3, it was a wrap. There was no better feeling than just saying, I'm going to take the Dozo play at a freaking timer this time. I'm going to fake you out until I get a poison touch, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, and so he really got me. And it was a real shame, because I really would have liked to keep playing, because basically I wanted to verse Sun. I wanted Arcanine to have a go.
Came what, 1 set for the entire day, I think, or the entire event?
Yeah, he literally came for came for that 1 set against Nick, and he did his job. Like, he largely invalidated it. But I'll be honest, in review, like, it's not enough to have a mon that just invalidates one team.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You need to have it more well spread. But yeah, so I mean, look, LIC was the harder run. I don't know that I go through Perth as much. My Perth games were good.
I'll pull them up over here.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, the only games I lost to were people who ended up in top 16. Yeah, like Sam Pandelis.
You still had a really impressive run, actually, dude. Like, you had Sam, Katz, Joji, Dim. Like, that's still, still a lot of really good players. I just realized, too, we actually both played Caleb. That was my, I believe, my round 1 opponent.
Yeah, right. There you go.
He ends up day 2ing as well, because I beat him in round... I either beat him round 1 or 2. I forget which one it was. Maybe it was round 2, actually.
Right.
It's funny to see it come back around.
Look, it was a good day. At the end of the day, it was bittersweet. Like, Dim's a friend, and losing to Dim, often and I'm always working on things as a trainer, but one of the things I'm always working on is when I have a good lead, trying to change it up to keep him guessing. And basically against Dim's team, and I'm sure he'll say this, but we had played on ladder. We bumped into each other 3 times. And in those 3 times, I was pretty sure I'd worked out the lead. And it's Zoroark, Volcarona, Zoroark Tera Stellas, and then uses Icy Wind. And then you catch the Kilowattrel, killing it always with Heat Wave and Icy Wind hitting it. And then because you Icy Winded, the Ursaluna is actually not faster than Zoroark. And so if he leads that mode, you're able to then outlast the Tailwind. But every single time I did it in Showdown, Icy Wind missed it, or Heat Wave missed. And so I went into the tournament thinking, I won't face this, but if I do, it'll be, it's really unlikely I'll face Dim. But if I do, I think I have an idea into it. And this just goes, test your matchups to the point in which you're like, nope, that's 100%. Because I think Dim knew that was the correct lead, and I questioned it. Which, is the difference. I really will always be interested if I had to run it back. But yeah, Dim was playing straight fire that day.
He was on one, that's for sure.
Yeah, other than that, though, the team did really well. Joji was using Victor Medina's team. And to be honest, I already had my day 2. And I really wanted to just play aggressive. And Joji just responded to that by playing really calmly and passively, and Yeah, I just wasn't really in the mindset. But against the other games, the game against Sam for my winning in, that scared me because, as you foreshadowed with Bryce, like the one in 2000, Sam got into a board state where it was Dozo versus Palapa, Sinistra, and Archaludon, and she had used three. Oh, I wrote it down actually because you always have to count your fishes.
You're talking about Sam.
Oh,
Samantha.
Samantha.
Sorry, I thought you meant Sam Pendolas for a second. I was really confused.
No,
Sorry,
no, sorry.
Samantha. Yes.
Yeah, Samantha was using Dozo,
Mm-hmm.
and so she fired off a total of 6 fishes, and the first 3 missed, and then 2 hit in a row.
Yeah.
And when you have 2 hit in a row, you are scared because you're like, oh no, the end game is in sight now. And it was quite frightening because it literally came down to Archaludon versus Dozo, and all Archaludon had to do was use Dracon and hit, and he used Dracon and he missed.
Oh no.
And I was like, this isn't happening. I'm gonna have to game 2 and 3 this. And then
like
Fish
this.
and missed. And then she protected, and I was like, yep, she's playing to the end game, because I was also starting to run out of Dracon Meteors.
Yeah.
And then luckily I had 2 left, and I used it the next turn, and I was able to hit and
seal it off.
That locked it up. And then in the second game, because I think this was actually a particularly interesting game, she led her Como O, and I guessed she would, so I led Ursaluna. And you know what Como O can't kill? It can't kill Ursaluna in Rain Terra Fairy. It just can't.
Yeah.
It might want to. It might want all the crits in the world, but you just can't do it.
Yeah, not getting to it with Flamethrower.
No, and she actually went for the optimal player, led Ursaluna Sinistra, and she went for Clangorous. No, she went for Clanging Scales and Woodhammer, and I Terra Fairyed the Ursaluna and actually just started getting off damage, and Sinistra survived both, I think. No, wait, hold on, no, she actually did Woodhammer into the Luna, but if she had it, I think Sinistra still lives because of the citrus, so it didn't. I can't remember actually. Either way, Sinistra lives, got into Trick Room, and then after that,
just healing and doing damage.
Yeah, I just switched Sinistra out and turned on the Rain, and then it was sort of off to the races.
Yeah.
But yeah, and yeah, it was. Look, Perth wasn't as exciting. I think Cats was a tricky game, but Sam, I think, identified that Talonflame Blood Moon is a really hard lead for the team.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I just have to call the 50-50 right, whether you Blood Moon the Archaludon or whether you Earth Power it. And I called it wrong. And he just went for Hyper Voice, and I Terra'd Psychic, and then he went for Tailwind. So after that, it's like, oh, I'm really in a bad
rough.
position.
Yeah, you're behind.
Whereas James led it a bit differently, and I was able to sort of do what I more wanted to, which was Terra Psychic and slowly, slow down the Ursaluna, and then ultimately KO it with an Electro Shot.
Yeah.
And then in the second game, it was a bit unlucky. He led Psyspam so he led Indeedee and Sneasler. I led Archaludon and I think Zoroark, and I went to burn the Sneasler, missed, and then went for Snarl, and he throat chopped the Sneasler thinking it was a Sinistra, which is still a good move. And then obviously I hadn't burned it, so I went for the burn. He decided, no, I'm still just going to throat chop, get rid of the piece, which was right. But that allowed me to Snarl again, so then the Indeedee wasn't getting off any damage. And then I brought Sinistra in. He was able to survive because he had that extra bulk on him, so he survived both the Expanding Force and the Throat Chop. And then I went into Trick Room, and unfortunately for him, I switched out Sinistra into Palapa and used Electro Shot, and it one-shot his Sneasler because it got off a critical hit. Which I think ultimately my positioning was such that I was already in a really strong position. But I know that clenched it up because, the best thing you can do when you're in Trick Room is have 4 mons that can use Protect.
Yeah.
And just KOing the Sneasler meant, well, you don't have that now. And it's really hard to find a way forward to get advantage, and then was able to whittle it down. But yeah, other than that, and I should mention one thing, one team that is like almost sadly free was my second round. I saw Annihilate, obviously, Zoroark.
Yeah, hard was it, dude.
Yeah,
I
like, and
was
then,
gonna throw that out at the start. Like that's why I was so drawn to Zoroark at the start of the format. Was like Mouse Ape was everywhere. It hardwalled Mouse Ape. But obviously it's kind of died off, and it's more solo ape than anything these days.
and I was actually talking with a friend. There is a way though. So the way to beat Zoroark with Mouse Ape is the mouse.
Just beat it up.
Yeah, and people don't do it, but beat up like KOs you. It's a roll for 3, but it's a roll. It's a roll for KOing in 2, but in 3 it always does. And if you think about Annihilate, that's a good trade. If you Tera Fire or just get Annihilate out of there and get rid of the Zoroark, it's really good. But because people don't play that game plan that often, like it's very rare. And also in this team, the reason Zoroark is so good is you can just see that all those mons, Volk is so good once Zoroark burns, a Dragonite. Once it slows down, say, a Goldango or taunts an Electabuzz. So yeah, this team has a lot of strengths, and that second round I just knew really strong. Yeah, and then the other rounds are a bit of a blur. I'm trying to think. Yeah, similar game plan. So yeah, actually rounds 2 and 5 were almost the exact same, like just Zoroark Volk lead and just outmaneuver. And that's why this team, what I would say to anyone picking it up in this later end of the season, this team is so good into balance. Zoroark takes early advantage, and then after that, you can actually play a slower game than the balanced teams, and you can
the balance type thing.
yeah, and that's really what Zoroark's there to do. He just puts his finger on the scale and says, actually, I'm just going to take a little bit of advantage away from you. And instead of you balancing out, you're a little bit in the negative. And then you use your other 3 mons, whether it be Volk, Sinistra, Pelipper, whether it be, Volk, Sinistra, Archaludon, Volk, Sinistra, Ursaluna, or the other, as we talked about earlier, Archaludon, Pelipper, Sinistra. You just use those modes to just constantly keep you in the game, recovering and just slowly crawling ahead with advantage.
Yeah, get that, just chip them down, and then eventually you've got more HP than they do, right?
Yeah, and then you will heal up. So yeah, I mean that's and yeah, I mean my final thoughts on this team was I wish for Perth they probably had to switch the Pelipper to Steel Terror. I think against that Ursaluna Talonflame, it creates a better 50-50 where you have to throw an Earth Power into the Pelipper. Otherwise, it KOs the Talonflame, and it also does a good amount of damage to Ursaluna. But obviously, the grass is there for Archaludon and Amoonguss. But to be honest, I think I underestimated how often Amoonguss is just invalidated by Zoroark. And yeah, what I will say is a good Amoonguss player will lead Amoonguss in the back, and then Zoroark doesn't get that instant taunt, but it's still quite deadly because then I can switch out Zoroark and bring it in late game. It's not ideal, but it still can, if you taunt Amoonguss in front of Archaludon in the rain, eventually Archaludon is just going to kill that thing with Electroshock.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
rack up enough boosts and it starts to go down pretty quickly.
Yeah, and the other good thing about Zoroark with Archaludon in late game is, I get to run more bulk than most because I don't have to invest in speed because I'm betting I get an Icy Wind or a Tailwind, or I throw myself into Trick Room.
Yeah. No, and that is cool, right? I personally love having that that extra speed control method, I guess, with that fast Icy Wind.
Yeah. So no, it was I really do recommend the team. I think it offers players who want to play Zoroark something different to just first turn KO. And I found that you don't really get to have as much fun with Zoroark because he just goes down.
It just dies in one turn type thing, yeah.
Yeah, whereas this, you really do get to play with the mon. Like you actually get to use it and enjoy it. And it really is quite funny. Like it's awful. I know the Melbourne scene hates it because it's Zoroark and I love it, but You know, it's fun. I barely ever get to experience it, but when I do, I always actually enjoy playing Zoroark because my particular Zoroark is actually very good into other Zoroark because they will normally have like a normal attack and then a ghost attack and then maybe one other like a fire attack. And
Yeah.
this team actually really walls that out. Unless they have Snarl, then it's not ideal, but most of the time they don't. So, and then in the GC as well, this Zoroark is really good at finding other Zoroarks because you can find them with the
Just
icy wind.
yeah.
So yeah.
But no, it's yeah, look, it's really cool. One thing I will say, like a big takeaway is I feel like you said you led Zoroark in like almost every game. And the fact that you day two'd both events like shows that it actually is really good, right? It's not just a gimmick, right? Especially when you've, built such a team around it that, functions so well. Yeah, it really enabled it to shine, and it felt like you just led it in almost every game, and it was just, yeah, very successful.
And I think, yeah, and you're exactly right. Like, that's the advantage with Zoroark. You get to lead it and you get so much more information because you just know your own mon and they don't. And you have three mons on the field and they have to deal with that. And that is such a difficult thing if you can build around it. And yeah, I do really like it for that. And to be honest, the hardest thing I find sometimes is not leading it.
Yeah.
But you can. The other thing is, right, the non-Zoroark modes are frightening. Like Rain is frightening. Hard Trick Room is frightening. And so yeah, it really does make you, they have to respect it. And once you start respecting him, you just have to make sure you're in advantageous positions. And that's what I'd say using the team. Like, don't be afraid. And also in GCs, let them make mistakes. And they will make mistakes. They will do weird stuff to find Zoroark, and you'll be sitting there like, "What? What did you just do? Like you just threw, a weird, like you just threw Hyper Voice into like Archaludon Pel. Oh, right, you're trying to find Zoroark, of course. But I think the weirdest one ever was, I think a Gallade used something silly. It used like
Psycho Cutter or something.
Yeah, it used a weird move into Archaludon. I remember I was sitting at the screen looking at it like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, you thought I had Zoroark in late game. Like you thought I just sent out Zoroark and he was like I had 2 mons left and I'm like, you thought he was there. But anyway, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it's good. Well, yeah, I guess, is there anything else you want to say? We've been here for practically 2 hours at this point, so
it's a massive team report, and I probably rattled on. So to anyone who's still here, yeah, thanks for listening. I really do think this mon was slightly underexplored. I think it got pigeonholed, and it was really fun, and I'm really hoping it's around in the next generation because
what, you're probably about a year off being able to use it again, right?
Yeah, at least. And I honestly think I only started scratching the surface. I almost used the dark one for a while because he got comeuppance.
Oh yeah, I've seen that move.
And I was just like, what? Like, I can use comeuppance and then you throw back, like, but I never got it off the ground. But that's the great thing about Pokemon. Like, you see a mon and you go, oh, this is all this thing can do. And then you look at it and you go, actually, I can put this thing here and I can fit it here. And now it starts doing something really different. That's why I'm really proud of this team, because I think I took something that was pigeonholed and I've shown that like you can use it differently and it's still good.
Yeah.
Like it can verse the best players in the world and it can throw them off. Like if you had said to me when I went to LAIC, I'll verse Gabriel, Ugarte, and Zoroark will work. Agadi, yeah, so, I would have said you're crazy. Like he's gonna rip through this team.
But nah, he didn't. 2-0, baby.
2-0. And I only hope one day I get to verse Devesti again and I get to use him because I really want to put him through the illusion ringer again. But I think it'll be a long time.
No, that's fair enough. Well, look, I want to say I appreciate you coming on and obviously talking about it. I think it's very good for people to hear this kind of, the thought process that goes into a team like this, right? Because, as you've said before, it is a bit off the wall, right? It's not a super meta team. But to show that, you know, you don't have to run the meta to have an amazing result, I do think is, yeah, really impressive.
Yeah, thank you. No, it feels really good to like LIC was a really proud moment for me to get there, and if only I could have made top cut, but to even get where I was and to play the teams I did, like, yeah, I agree. Like, if you play off meta, it's harder. But once you start finding something that you've built yourself, you actually can really get into the swing of things, and it's really exciting.
Yeah.
When you get there.
No, I agree.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Glad to have you.
Yeah,
Mate.
it's been really fun.
It has been. But yeah, I guess anyone who got to the end of this one, thank you, appreciate it. And again, yeah, obviously, massive shout out to Jim for coming on. Yeah, I will. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.